Gospel Reflections for Maundy Thursday, 1st of April 2021. The Gospel text is from John chapter 13 verses 1 to 15. The main focus of this Gospel reading is the Eucharist gives us spiritual energy to give ourselves totally in humble and sacrificial service of the needy, so that we may become worthy to have a share with Jesus, worthy to have a share with Jesus. In brief, the main theme is, in order to become worthy disciples, we should render humble and sacrificial service. Humble and sacrificial service. By washing the feet of his disciples, in the context of the Passover meal, which is his last supper with his disciples, Jesus takes upon himself the role of a humble servant, since it was the duty of servants, literally slaves, to wash the feet of their masters and guests in Jewish society. His action of stooping down to wash the feet of his disciples in chapter 13 verse 5 was a sort of acted out role play to demonstrate his intention to render humble service to humanity unto death, and thus accomplish his mission on earth. He wanted to teach us that the same love with which he sacrificed his life on the cross should also be shown by us through humble and sacrificial service, especially to the needy and the marginalized. The symbolic meaning of foot washing by Jesus at the Last Supper is more than an act of humility. Often we are told that it was an act of humility, just that. But actually, it means much more than that. It refers to his role as a humble servant who renders a sacrificial service to the point of death on the cross. A sacrificial service to the point of death on the cross. The lesson he wanted to teach his disciples by reversal of roles, as if they were his masters and he was their slave, becomes clear from his reply to Peter's objection. Jesus told Peter when he objected, he didn't want his feet to be washed by his master. Jesus told him, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Chapter 13 verse 7. If it was a mere physical washing of feet to remove dirt, or a mere lesson in humility or service of a slave, or mere respect given to a guest as it is done by washing the feet and hands in the tribal society where I work, what is there to understand later on? What is there to understand later? You can understand, anybody can understand it on the spot. This word later in this context refers to his sacrificial death on the cross. Only later, when he would lay down his life on the cross on the following day, which we call Good Friday, the disciples would understand how and to what extent they should serve one another out of love. Only when he lays down his life on the cross, they would understand how and to what extent they should serve one another out of love. Thus for Jesus, his sacrificial death on the cross was his ultimate act of service to humanity. The Synoptic Gospels also confirm this. For example, in Mark's Gospel, chapter 10, verse 45, we read, "The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve." Serve till what? Till what extent? The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve to the extent of giving his life, means sacrificing his life as a ransom for many, means for the redemption of many people. When Peter objected to Jesus' washing of his feet, he explained that washing his feet was a condition was a necessary condition to have a share, to have a part with him. In chapter 13 verse 8, to have a share literally means to get inheritance. To have a share with Jesus is to have a fellowship with him, or to participate fully in his life and to be his faithful disciples. To be worthy of having this share, disciples must be willing to wash one another's feet as their Lord and teacher did. Chapter 13 verses 14 to 15. That is, the disciples must be willing to give or spend their life totally in service, and that too a sacrificial service, a service which requires sacrifices. Though through foot washing, Jesus wanted to demonstrate that service-mindedness was a necessary requirement to be a faithful disciple, to have a part with him, share with him. He wanted to tell them that service-mindedness was the hallmark of Christian discipleship. There is a close relationship between the Eucharist and the foot washing done by Jesus at the Last Supper. The Eucharist gives us the spiritual energy to be at the service of others and to be men and women for others, not for ourselves. We are to believe that the Eucharist is indeed Jesus' body broken, and his blood shed for our service, for our salvation, in order to give us the spiritual energy to break our bodies and shed our blood, that is, spend ourselves for the service of others. Does it do this work? What is service then? Service mainly implies self-giving or giving one's life for the welfare of others, which includes a sharing of one's time, talents, resources, knowledge and energies. Service or sacrifice are interrelated. Do this in my memory implies do this in memory of my sacrificial service which culminated on the cross. Hence, whenever we hear these words during the Holy Mass, we are reminded that our bodies, that is our energies, our talents, our time, our activities need to be spent or sacrificed for the service of others. Today, we need to ask ourselves whether we receive the Eucharist just as a routine or just for our psychological satisfaction, or take it as a spiritual energy to give ourselves in service. As Jesus' body is given up or broken or sacrificed in the Eucharist for our spiritual welfare, we also need to sacrifice our bodily energies for others' service, making it a sacrificial service. There are two types of services which we render. Number one, those services which we have to render out of compulsion, like our daily work, job, duty, and household chores. Number two, those services which we willingly and voluntarily take up out of love for the good of those who are in need of our love. Do we involve ourselves in the latter type of services? When we examine ourselves, most of the time we do only first type of services, and we usually are very unwilling to do the second type of services. Do we involve ourselves in the latter, this second type of services like Jesus? Are we willing to stoop down, to heal, to care, to serve, to forgive, and to comfort those who are in need, of any sort of service? Do we actively look for opportunities for this sort of proactive service, or do it out of choice in our own little ways, such as saying a word of comfort, saying a word of consolation, assurance in favor of the needy and the suffering? The Lord whom we encounter in the Eucharist is encountered among such people. It is by washing the feet of such people, that is, by making sacrifices for their service, that we live what we celebrate in the sacrament of the Eucharist. Maundy Thursday's liturgy motivates us to connect the Eucharist with works of mercy and service, such as sharing our food, clothes, things, space or place with the needy, and visiting the sick and the aged in their houses or hospitals. Many of us might be receiving the Eucharist for our personal and private spiritual benefits only, and dissociating Eucharist from the deeds of service. Let us cultivate the habit of praying in the Let us cultivate the habit of praying to the Eucharistic Lord to energize us to do works of mercy or service. As long as we do the deeds of mercy in Jesus' memory, the Eucharist becomes the bread that gives life and love to the world, not only to us.